My goal is to put on the mortgage industry's best sales meeting for the week. And so as my special guest today, I have Coach Greg Harkavy. What's up, my man?
How are you?
Good, man. I am pumped. I've never interviewed you, and I know a lot about you. You know, we've met in all kinds of places. So I'm just personally looking forward to getting to know you better, and also the mortgage coach community getting to know you better, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And, we've always had this kinship, even from, we're both originating in Orange County. I mean, it's been over 2 decades. And the relationship has always been super positive. So I'm honored to be interviewed and to be introduced to everybody in the community.
Right on, man. Well, I don't know if do you still live in Huntington Beach?
Yes, I do.
So Huntington Beach guy, where I went to high school. I went to Ocean View High. Have you always lived in that part of Southern California?
No, my first 17 years I lived in LA County, a little city called Covina. And it's really weird, 45 minutes from the beach, but we had this surfing community. So every college I applied to had to be close to the coast. And 17, I knew that I was going to go somewhere. So I went to UC Irvine and moved into Newport. And I said, this is home for me. So I've been here for more of my life than not. But the first 17 were inland.
Yeah, well, if you're a surfer, you are truly blessed because you're in like some of the best surf in the country, heck, in the world. So congrats on living life by design, brother.
Thank you.
So I've interviewed Daniel a lot of times. Many of you know Daniel Harkavy, pretty well-known leader and founder of the Building Champions. But you've been with Building Champions now for how long?
It's almost 20 years.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever. And I know you coached a lot of some of the top leaders in the mortgage coach community. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your take on what are the things, what are the critical few? What are the things that really separate the best from the best? But before we get into that topic, the 2 things, let's just give people if you could give us a little bit of a backstory on your journey as a coach.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. So you referenced Daniel. Daniel and I are as close as 2 brothers can be. I mean, we shared a bedroom for those first 17 years. Some might argue that's why I moved out at 17 and went to college. But no, we've had this great relationship. I was going to be an attorney. And going through college, I watched Daniel work for one of my best friend's mortgage companies. And I saw his career. And I'm like, this mortgage thing seems interesting to me. Do I want to go through 4 years of college plus 3 years of law school, pass the bar, and then start at a level where my first year in the mortgage business, I could be way ahead? So I started getting really intrigued by that. And quite frankly, I had to convince the owners of the mortgage company as well as my brother that I should be in the mortgage business. They're like, no, you got a great analytical mind. Do that. You don't really understand sales. The mortgage business is tough. I'm like, that's all I need to hear. And that's why I'm getting into the business. So graduated college, got into it. Daniel and I worked together. He was a branch manager. I was an originator. After about 10 years, he went on sabbatical, moved up to Oregon, and really thought about what his passion was, and it was coaching. And that's when Building Champions was born about 23 years ago. He and I would talk a little bit, and he's like, join me. And he would tell me all these stories, all these incredible stories about how people were producing at better levels. Their lives were better. Marriages were enriched. I'm like, dang, that sounds awesome. He's like, join me. I'm like, how about you coach me? So I didn't want to become a coach without seeing the principles played out. And by the time we were done with him coaching me, I was the #1 producer in the mortgage company that I had. I was a producing net branch manager. I had seen how the life plan worked. I saw how vision worked. I created a culture with my team and my branch that was, even though it was a top producing branch, it was tranquil, it was chill, it was high trust. And from that point, I started thinking, should I be a coach? Because I feel like I'm going to miss out on the opportunity to do the same thing that I just had received for other people. And it took a couple years to think about, am I really just following my brother because I love being with him? Or is this really my unique calling? I went all the way back to my childhood and I realized there was one common thread. My friends would always come to me and ask me about deep things, and we'd process stuff. Back then I thought, should I be a psychiatrist or a psychologist? And I'm like, I don't want to deal with the heavy stuff all the time. I can deal with heavy stuff, but didn't know coaching existed. And I'm like, well, I'm coaching in the mortgage business. When I come to life, it's when I get to speak with people and listen to them and understand their needs and help them with a game plan. And now I get to do it purely without just like a 30 or 60-day burst when you're in an escrow with somebody. So that's what brought me to coaching.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, you guys are pioneers in the coaching space. And that was a new idea. I mean, today, many of the nation's most successful loan officers have been coached. You know, coaching is no longer this new idea. And I think it's pretty well understood that if you have a coach and you have someone to help hold you accountability, hold you accountable, you're going to perform better. And, you know, and I hear different people saying you'll do double, 2.5 times, 1.5. But I think, you know, it's common sense that if you have a good coach that's helping you optimize yourself and be accountable, you're going to go further and you're going to go better. So I think that's well understood. When we do this interview, I want to also be intentional that I think that the loan officer of the future needs to be a coach. You know, I think it's always been a good idea and it's always been a competitive advantage. But I want to put the context in with disruptors coming in, with real estate companies getting in the mortgage business. You know, the two things that you could do as originator to win is there's riches and niches. So have a niche, and leadership always wins. So if you can, you know, become a coach, you'll show up better for the borrower, and you'll show up with a greater level of leadership with the realtor or referral partner. So Greg, as we do this interview, let's try to give folks, you know, like we're going to cover these two critical concepts, these two critical things, but let's also try to develop, you know, like what is the difference between being a coach and a leader? Maybe they're the same, but let's talk about coaching principles. You cool with that?
That's great. That's right within the wheelhouse.
All right, cool. So guys, if you are on Facebook Live, you could comment down below. If you're watching this on social media, whether you're live, you're watching the recording, if you get a takeaway or you just think, hey, this was a good use of my time, give us a like so that we know that you're engaged and you're tuned in. And trust me, like Greg and I talk about this, we want this to be organic. So if you have questions, we'll answer them. So just post them down below in Facebook Live. And everybody, I'm not watching the questions in Zoom, even though there's a lot of you in Zoom. The questions that I'm going to respond to in the live event have to come through Facebook Live for me to see them, because I can only do 2 things at once, not 3. So Greg, let's unpack. You know, what are the 2 things that the most successful loan officers are doing?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. Number one, I think they're building a business rather than a job or a career. And what I've seen over the 20 plus years, when an originator really doesn't look at it as I'm just a salesperson or an originator, but they're building a business with the future, and they have the mindfulness to understand what it looks like to run that business. The key for that is sustainability. You'll find originators, and I got to imagine a lot of people listening to this understand what perhaps burnout looks like, of grinding really hard. And right now we're back into what I'd consider a nice tailwind market. Business is very active again, but getting rid of the highs and lows and predictably building year after year really takes an understanding of who you are as an individual. I think, you know, we'll get into the questions about the future, but the best originators really understand who they are and they understand who their customer is. And they take a very serious approach to that. And they don't separate the difference between self-development and building a business. So the originators that I see are also very balanced. They understand what's important to them about life. So when they show up in front of a prospective referral source, a borrower, they're very clear on who they are, what's important to them, and what they offer. And I think personally, Dave, I mean, more than anything, and with technology and everything else that's going on, we all crave authenticity. And I think when an originator can be authentic and be present and actually listen, and this will probably get into the coaching aspect of things, that's critical. So understanding that you're running a business, but truly understanding who you are in that business is key. Spending the time working on yourself then understanding your customers' needs. That's business 101, but I think that's a huge separator. When I see somebody really dialed into their business, whether it's niches and riches, it's that. I think the second thing is they also understand what's unique about their company. They have to understand themselves, but truly, what is it that our company does well? For an example, if you are a primarily jumbo lender and your company is really strong with government loans, and that's where their competitive pricing is, and you're wondering what it's like to compete, and you're competing against banks, brokers, and your independent mortgage bank, do you understand where your niche is? Is it going to be competing for the exact same product, or are you going to think about creative ways of financing that allow your customers to get the best product? So again, I think Mortgage Coach is a way to be able to say, how do we separate ourselves where it doesn't become a price trap, but understand what your company does really well, accept it, and then find the lane.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So think of your business as a business and a practice. And I do find that. I mean, I've even catch myself from months to months where you're driving the short-term goals, yep, and you've lost sight on the bigger strategic perspective. And there's no doubt when I interview the best and most successful loan officers, they're grinding hard on a short game, but it's always within the context of the mortgage practice that they're building. So let's get tactical around that number one. Walk us through, just coach us up. I mean, pretend that you're talking to a small group, even though there's hundreds of people watching this live and there's going to be hundreds of people watching the video. Walk us through some steps tactically, to focus on running our mortgage practice as a practice, and not just, I want to close 5 loans next month, or I want to close 20 loans next month. Let's go from production to practice.
Which is a great way to set it up. And it's funny, you said tactical, and I was thinking the difference is strategic thinking versus tactical, right? So the first step is to get yourself in a space to think strategically. Most originators I run into, they are grinding. They're spending most of their time in their business. They have a great work ethic. They understand what it's like to get business. But the first step is, how much time are you either weekly or monthly taking just to work and think on your business? I mean, that's step number one.
Time out. What is the difference in the amount of time between I'm a transactional in my business all the time? What is the on time that needs to be dedicated weekly and monthly?
So for the mortgage business, I think if you could dedicate Fridays after funding hours. So for most of you, I don't know where your cutoff is, but typically if it's around noon or so on a Friday, I'd block the second half of the day off every Friday. Get out of the office, turn off the phone or put it on D&D, because most of the people aren't going to be urgently needing to reach you, and set a good 4 hours aside. That would be a minimum, I think, 4 hours a week. And that's where you can really think on your business, learn, evaluate, understand what your business is actually doing. But that's step number one, is just creating the space for it. I think from that, if you can build on that, it would be awesome to take one full day a month. Maybe one of those Fridays, maybe not the last day of the month, but one of those Fridays, perhaps the first Friday, that you'd spend a full day taking it off. It's a different speed, Dave. That's the one thing that I think is hardest, because you're downshifting in a fifth year business. But to get an originator to say, stop, think, and reflect, we understand as coaches what a challenge that is. Yet I'm convinced that it's perhaps the biggest separator of what's going to create a sustainable growth business for you.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, when I interview the real monsters, and you guys know who they are taking time to be strategic. They're tracking their results. They have time to actually, how many people did I talk to? How many calls did I make? How many apps did I do? How many total cost analysis did I do for my families? And then they're booking the day, they're booking the week, and they're booking the month. And they're doing it within the context of a bigger strategic plan. So remember, guys, if you have questions, we have a guy who's been a top producing branch manager. He's been a coach for 20 years. That brings up another point, because when you and I talked a month or so ago, we talked about bringing you into the community more often. You do have a new kind of leadership focus at Building Champions. So why don't you share that? Like, what are you doing at Building Champions right now as a coaching leader? And then let's unpack number one a little bit more, and then let's unpack number two after we hear about that.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've recently spent time, we're trying to practice what we preach. We've spent a disproportionate amount of time as a leadership team in our company to reorganize. And the point of reorganizing is we have some goals that, quite frankly, are bigger than our current reality. And we've been in this business for 20 some odd years. We know that our product is good, but we knew that the way we were structured, we can't get there by doing the same things. And one of the biggest realizations was we have to be more front facing and be in front of the customer more often. So part of what we're doing, quite frankly, is just spending more time. This is, Dave, you've been super gracious to invite us in and let us add value, and likewise, you add a ton to us. But really, we want to grow in the mortgage space, in financial services. So part of what I've been doing, as well as our coaches, Bill Hart, Michael Regan, Sue Weaver, we're all trying to create opportunities to add more value to the community first and foremost. Quite frankly, to demonstrate the relevancy of what we've been doing for 20 plus years works. So for us, what we do know is when we get a chance to work on the opportunity with somebody, we take a holistic approach. So we're looking at the whole person, but what we find is when we start there first, production grows year after year. We've yet to see somebody that goes through this process and to dive in where they don't build sustainable production that, north of 100 million. Some people, it's like, hey, 50 million's fantastic, but we see it in a way that's sustainable and healthy. And for us right now with our restructure, we're just looking for opportunities to meet with people that want to grow. That's our passion. Our purpose statement is we want to positively impact lives, one person at a time. We don't know how else to do that rather than getting in front of people.
Yeah, and so you're leading the mortgage vertical for Building Champions as a coach and as a leader of mortgage for Building Champions. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say, and even more recently, we've continued to refine that. I haven't been readily available on the market for a while, and we decided I probably should be coaching even more. So I've been focusing very internally with the company, and I don't know if I'd say it's my heyday because my best days are yet to come, but I used to coach almost up to 70 mortgage folks at a time.
Wow.
And yeah, I shrunk my client load down to 10 with the role of more internally focused leadership on the company. Now we're like, yeah, maybe about 35 or so select people would be great. So we're increasing the capacity with myself as well.
All right. Well, I just threw a couple of questions I want to ask. Not a curveball, but I know we came to this conversation talking about these core two and coaching leadership. But I'm just curious, after hearing that you were coaching 70 loan officers at one time, I mean, what are like some common just mistakes, even the people that you interview? Let's face it, anybody that you're coaching, they're intentional enough and they're successful enough to afford to pay you. So these are pretty good folks, but there's still probably some common, just misses that you see. What are some of those common mistakes?
Yeah, I think one of the most common is they don't know their core identity. And this might sound crazy because they're successful people, but they haven't really figured out who they are. So they start to do business with people that they don't want to do business with, and they start to resent the business. So they might have good production, but the type of business they're doing doesn't feel good. They have dissatisfied maybe referral partners or borrowers. They feel like they're always grinding. The equity, if you will, that they have in the relationships are based more off of, gosh, this person's good for 2 or 3 deals a month and I don't feel like I have a choice, rather than saying, wait a minute, are you really clear on who you are and the type of business you want to run? So fundamentally, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see when people are actually doing pretty good production, but they haven't quite said what's most important to me.
What's usually when you're talking to someone that, they're not doing the production they want to be doing? And I doubt that a lot of your clients fit in this category because just to the fact that they can afford you and that they are hiring you, they're doing a certain level of success. But let's just say the folks that are at the bottom end of the production level, or when you guys do group coaching, what do you usually see as the biggest miss from just call it the struggler, the person that's just not getting the volume, the production they need?
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's how much are you prospecting? I mean, quite frankly, if you're not spending a disproportionate amount of time finding the right sort of opportunities, you're going to be struggling. If you understand what your niche is, that's great, but prospecting still today is the key. Usually when the business isn't quite where it is, I'll look and say, okay, have you really segmented your business? Do you know where your business comes from? Are you going after those opportunities? Prospecting does not mean it's only going after the realtor database. It's how well are you working your own client base, your sphere of influence, social networking, affinity partners. But are you spending time every single day and every single week looking for new opportunities? And until you know you're doing that, you can't tell whether or not you're doing it right. So I first look for activity. The more activity in prospecting, if it's not getting results, then you start to say, why isn't it converting? And you start to pay attention more to what your approach is. How are the conversations going? Are you asking the right sort of questions? And if conversion is the issue, then you can refine it. It's like, okay, at least you're doing the prospecting activities. You're still not getting results. Then we can say, okay, well, what is it that you're doing? Are you going after the right sort of opportunities?
What is the prospecting standard? I don't know whether it's Building Champions or if this is just your standard, but what do you see as, the standard prospecting rhythms of the sustainable, high producing mortgage pro?
Yeah, and it depends on where your business is at and what your gap is. So how much you want to grow, that's going to change. So to say everybody should be prospecting 3 hours a day for new opportunities, I think would be a bit of a misnomer. If your gap's bigger, I'd say it should be 5 hours a day. Like if you don't have a big pipeline, what are you spending your time doing? So you should spend more time prospecting. But if you've got a good pipeline, but you're not hitting the goal you want to, well, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day that you're looking for new opportunities. I think what happens is we get comfortable and we start to think that we have relationships, but we don't evaluate whether or not they're actually producing the results that we want. So we get kind of comfortable and say, okay, I know the people that like me and they'll refer me business when they're busy. But if you're not hitting your goals, then you have to think about, when was the last time I actually started to meet new people in the marketplace? And for an originator, all the way up to if you're in a sales leadership position, are you recruiting the same people that you always knew? Or are you actually finding out who's doing what in the marketplace? And if I'm an originator, I'd actually want to find out who's actually doing business that I don't know. In the real estate offices, in other affinity groups, go find places and meet people that you've never met before. So at whatever level you need to close the gap, it'd be proportional. 5 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour.
Yeah, but here's my takeaway for this, for mortgage coach community watching it. And again, not a new idea. We talk about it all the time, but it's 2 to 5 hours. If you're new or you're underperforming, it's as close to 5 hours as you can get. And if even the most successful loan officers that are killing it, and I always use Josh Metal as an example because I did that interview on prospecting mastery where, he's killing it personally. He's got a culture and a branch that's killing it, and they have a 2-hour discipline, and it makes lots of sense. So I want everybody coming from this with a little bit of a inventory. Again, I'm trying to put on the best sales meeting, and that means take inventory of your prospecting rhythms right now. Like this week, let's take some inventory on, are we killing it? Where do we rate, and what can we do to adjust it? So I'm going to throw that to you. Let's say you're talking to a client that's only doing 50% of the prospecting that they should be doing. How do you help get them focused on getting a plan to upgrade? What are some steps, or what would be a advice you'd give if you just got done with a session with me and I'm third week in a row that I'm only at 50% of my prospecting targets?
Yeah, I'm going to want to know what your reluctance is first. Like, why aren't you actually doing the full 100%? So step one is understanding where's the resistance. Oftentimes it might be, I don't even know who my target client should be or my target referral source should be. So I'll stop there and say, okay, you need to describe your ideal partner. What are you looking for? Clearly understand to the level of production they do, to what kind of shared values you want them to have. What are you looking for? Because if you're not clear on the ideal partner, then you're prospecting maybe 50% of the time because you don't even know what you're looking for. So start with really creating a profile of your ideal partner. Second part of that is I'd recommend that you start to be able to talk to your community and say, hey, I'm looking for this type of partner. Who do you know that I don't know that I should talk with? And would you introduce them to me? I mean, I don't want to oversimplify this business. I understand the psychology of sometimes why we won't do what we ought to do. But if we understand what we're looking for and then we start sharing it with our sphere of influence of people we're looking for, more often than not, we actually find the people we want to do that sort of partner planning with. But it starts there. Have a clear idea of your ideal profile. Ask people who know people that might know someone like that. And then third, what is it that you uniquely offer them? Are you really clear on why those ideal partners would be better with you than without you? And
Love
start
this.
meetings.
So I just got a couple questions on Facebook Live. One of the questions just said, this topic is perfectly timed. I'm meeting with my branch manager for a business planning to generate more opportunities and strategies to help our community. So I know that Building Champions has, like, you could go to the website and download some type of a planning tool. Could you at least, one, answer the question, and two, tell them how they can get, some free value from your website?
Yeah, fantastic. Just real quickly, we do have a mortgage diagnostic tool that will help you understand where your planning should come from, and we'd welcome anybody for that free opportunity. We can share that. Would you restate that question, because I want to make sure that I answer it exactly right?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say it the way I took it rather than read it. But someone is trying to get focused. They're meeting with their branch manager, which means the branch manager is trying to help them get clear on some business planning to generate more opportunities. And so I know you've got the diagnostic, and guys, we're going to talk about that. Highly recommend that you go through this process. Just, I interviewed Bill Hart recently on it, and my takeaway was just, I don't know, probably 15 minutes, 10 minutes to go through the diagnostic would probably be a valuable 10 minutes of your time. Yeah. And then you guys are also offering a free coaching session to review it. So, well, first of all, why don't you answer how people could get that? Because I think this question is just so on point.
Yeah, and you can go directly. We have a landing page set up for everybody on this Facebook Live. We'll make sure that we get that contact information out to you as well, Dave. And we'd be more than happy to walk you through the diagnostic and that complimentary coaching session. So
whoever's watching this, down below in Facebook Live, in comments, we're going to have a link to this diagnostic. And in a minute, I'll try to multitask and find it, and maybe post it myself. If someone from Building Champions is listening to this live, feel free to put a link down below. So here's another question that just came in. And this, I'm thinking, might be a new loan officer. Arlene just said, how do I prospect? What does that involve? So I don't want to, we can spend the rest of this call answering that question. And Arlene, I'm going to put a few links to other interviews I've done that will answer this question in more detail. But I am going to give you 5 minutes right now for Greg, and I might add some color to it. So let's just not spend more than 5 minutes on it. But what's the Greg Harkavy Building Champions Prospecting 101? What does that mean?
Yeah, and I think we might be able to answer both questions. Like, I'm going in to meet with my branch manager and figure out how to increase production. So maybe we can scratch the itch for both of those questions.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to look at, where does business come from? No, this sounds super basic, but prospecting in its very essence is looking for opportunities for people that you want to do business with. So you can start from your sphere of influence and understand where are the opportunities. I think anybody that's in this business should look at all the different places they want to get business from. So understand what your pillars are. Is it the real estate community? Is it attorneys? Is it financial planners? Is it consumer direct? There's all sorts of different ways you can build your business. You can do it through social media, but know where you want to get your business. I think the first place you want to start is, who do I know that's likely to need a loan? I mean, really that simple. So first, identify where you're going. Second is, I think you really do need to understand, what is your unique value proposition? If you don't start there, the idea of prospecting, I think, is difficult. So you have to deeply believe that you're doing something maybe more as a mission, like, I'm here to serve X. If you don't have that basis, I would say, please start there. Because what doesn't really work so well is somebody just trying to sell something. Nobody really likes to feel like they're being sold. But when somebody says, hey, I deeply believe I'm in this business to make a difference, and here's how I do it, you start to invite people into that mission. So I would look at, where do you want to go in your business? And then when it gets down to simple sales, how many calls am I going to make a day? How many appointments am I going to set a day? And then from there, what do I want from my business? Do I know what to say? Do I have scripts? If I'm going to approach somebody, what should be the first thing? If I call somebody, I think the very first thing you need to do is determine, what's the win for this phone call? It's not that you get a deal, it's just that you get a face-to-face appointment. Then if I get that face-to-face appointment, what's that face-to-face appointment going to cover? Is it going to be something that at least we find out, is there a basis to do business together? Dave, earlier you were talking about maybe coaching as the separator. I think this is where coaching actually kicks in for an originator. If you go into any prospecting mode and think about what I can get, rather than what does the market need, and how do I enter into it with curiosity and ask questions and get to know other people's business, you have to start there before you can come up with a solution. So I wouldn't look at prospecting as a selling activity. I would look at prospecting as a discovery process. And I'm going to tell you, people that have prospecting reluctance, as soon as you start realizing, hey, you don't go and sell anything. Go learn what people need. Understand them and understand yourself and figure out where the solution is together. If you go in that approach, people are going to say yes to your meetings. They're going to get value from that transaction as far as the relationship in that meeting, where it's going to be, hey, all I want to know is what makes your business tick, what's challenging about it, what do you think is most important in an originating partner, and start to go from that place. Think about how you add value before you think about how you get more deals. So
I love that. And I do think that's really good leadership, because I do know a lot of the people that have call reluctance, they think they have to be interesting. I'm not interesting enough. And if you really change your paradigm that I'm going to be more interested in you than any other loan officer that you've met with, you are going to show up with more confidence. And trust me, part of the paradigm that we teach at Mortgage Coach is tailor. Ask great questions, learn, be on point, teach. And you can put, change the word teach to coach. I named Mortgage Coach for a reason. I also own the domain Mortgage Planner. I considered calling it Mortgage Advisor. So, those were all names that I considered when I named the company Mortgage Coach. And I named it Coach because I so passionately believe that, like, the most valuable people in my life were coaches. They not only helped me make decisions, but then they helped me make those decisions right over time. They coached me. And so I think everybody, if you're new in the business, you may not, you're not going to feel like you're the advisor yet, because you haven't done this enough to be a quote unquote advisor. But if you show up interested, and then you're at a good company, you have good mentors around you, you create lots of total cost analysis so you can actually become a mortgage wizard and a financial expert, you'll get there. So I think you had something else to say.
Yeah, I just, permission to riff.
Maybe.
Yeah. If you are new, I think step number one is become very technically competent. Understand underwriting guidelines, understand company policies, understand how to package a loan, understand what's good and not good for a client. Like, become that student so you can get to the advisor stage quickly. But when you take it, and I know that I may have a skewed perspective, I think the mortgage business is incredible, not just because you can make a lot of money, but you can be real difference makers in the probably most financial decisions are less important than a mortgage one. It's a huge thing. And then when you attach that to the American dream of owning a home, what we get to do in this business to serve people is huge. Before we started this meeting, we were talking about, Dave, where you at? And you're at WeWork in Portland, and I'm in my office in Newport Beach, but we're looking at new shared workspaces. So I'm going to be going to get out of a lease and look at better virtual solutions. But in that process, I've been packing up boxes. I still have thank you notes from 25 years ago when I was originating. I still have borrowers reach out to me, thanking me for the difference I made in their lives by helping them with their loan. That is what we call a why file at Building Champions. And as a coach, we do that as well when we realize what we did made such a positive difference. And it's humble. We get to be a part of this process. We get to make a difference. If you don't see the business that way as an originator, I just want to challenge you and ask yourself, are you having fun? If so, what are the sort of activities that you're doing when you're having fun? It's likely when you know you're making a positive difference. So
wow, loved that riff. And I don't know if anybody else took the note Y file. Like, if you don't have a Y file, get a Y file. My mind immediately flashed to an interview that I did with Jacqueline Gallegos, although she was recently married. Can't remember her new name, but Jacqueline. She had her Y file on her wall. You know, like thank you cards. Like, you came into her office, and she tries to get 50% of her clients into her office, where she delivers this amazing total cost analysis experience. But she had her Y file on her wall. Good idea. But guys, have your Y file. And if anybody is watching this call, you listen to this call, and you have an incredible Y file, whether it's a picture, whether it's books on a coffee table, take a picture, share a link down below, inspire the mortgage coach community. So let me go back into chat real quick. So for those of you that are asking for that link to the assessment, I found it. It's posted. It's down below. It's in the link. Michael Green, you're the man. He just said, I love coming into my office and watch these interviews. Always motivates me. Can Greg walk us through a script for cold calling? So maybe we got about 20 minutes left, Greg. I don't think we've completely unpacked number 2 the way I want, but any quick scripts you want to throw out, knowing that Michael gave us a kudos and asked for a script?
Yeah, it's funny because I'd say don't cold call at all. That would be my first script. You can if you want to, but you probably know enough people to connect you with the people you need to. I think one of the most effective things to do is ask somebody, would you simply connect me with somebody on an email connection? Introduce me to somebody that you think I should speak with, and let me run it from there. I think that's number 1. So cold calling, I'm like, who are you cold calling? If you have a cold list, it's just a different business. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I don't know that I'd encourage cold calling. I'd want you to go towards warm. And if you can figure out where the warm place is first, go there. Because I doubt you've exhausted all your warm possibilities. Most of us are more connected than we realize, but we just don't ask. So I'd say if it's anything cold, be willing to say, hey, I'm on a mission to help people in the mortgage industry. I believe what we do makes a difference. And can you help me? Because I have to tell you, I want to grow the business. I want to impact more people's lives. And I just need to meet more of the right people. So is there somebody that you would be willing to introduce me to?
So I love what you said conceptually. I was at Mastermind this week, and Steve Sims was on stage. And here's a guy who, one of his clients is Richard Branson. Some of the most wealthy, hard to get meetings with people on the planet Earth are his customers. And someone asked him, how do you get to meet with these people? And it was all about leveraging is who, finding the right person to make the introduction. And I'm going to be interviewing Steve Sims again in a few days, guys. So I will ask him for some, because it's not just script, it's strategy. What are some strategy and scripts to get the meeting with the biggest realtor in your market? So stay tuned on that. Also, I've interviewed Jeremy Forcier, who is a cold calling monster. He's a warm calling monster. He's a prospecting monster. And I'll put a link to that so you'll get a big answer to that question. Let me see what else I have. So Mark said, thanks. Robert asked about service agreements. Robert, I'm going to save that for last. Totally appreciate you posting that question. If we don't get to it on this interview this Friday at 9:00, we do our mastermind call. And I will speak to that in more detail Friday at 9 if we don't get to it in the last 18 minutes of today's conversation. So let's unpack number 2 a little bit. I think we crushed number 1. For those of you that didn't watch the whole interview, you just came in live, it was about number 1 thing, focus on your practice. Like, production's important, but you're not going to have production. You're not going to have sustainable production if you don't think of your business, as a mortgage practice. And that means having a strategy, knowing who you are, and being consistent in building a business. Remind me on number 2, you said it, but I want to make sure we really net it out.
Yeah, and I also want to, spend time on if this is your show, but if you want to talk about how you're coaching, becoming a coach, I think
let's go with that. Let's go, because I think number 2 is we've built it into a lot of these. So let's talk about how can a loan officer go and, what is a coach? What does it mean to be a loan officer coach?
Yeah, and I think there's certain skill sets that every loan officer should embrace. And one of them is understanding behavioral language. You have to become an effective communicator. Part of that is, do you really know how to actively listen and understand what people are saying? Oftentimes, we're thinking about the next thing we want to say, but are we really listening? So number 1, become an active listener. Number 2, ask very effective and powerful questions. I think then number 3, based off of the information you're hearing, do you understand what the solutions would be for the person you're with? I think this applies for a borrower, a realtor, or anybody that you might be sitting down with, that those things first are important. So, how do you develop it? DISC is a behavioral assessment that at Building Champions we use extensively. All of our coaches are certified with the DISC instrument. But what we find is when you can understand behavioral language, you can communicate with everybody. Oftentimes, we communicate with people that speak our language. So you'll hear some classic examples. Originators might be a driver and an influencer, extroverted, very people-oriented, results-oriented. But when they might meet somebody that could be more steady and compliant, their language gaps are pretty big. And they may not be able to answer the questions or connect with them on the same level as they would that someone like themselves. So I think it's really important as a coach to understand who you're in front of, understand who you are, what your natural language is, then figure out what theirs is so you can communicate effectively. And the reason why I'm sharing this is I think the core of any effective coach is establishing trust quickly. People have to feel that you actually care and that you're authentic. And you do that first and foremost by the way you communicate, both in what you say and how you listen and the questions you ask.
How you listen and how you show you listen. And to your point, that is really the difference between the coach advisor and the salesperson, who's all about, I know what I know, and I want to tell you what I know, and I want to convince you that I'm the right person. And no doubt, mortgage coach is built on the concept of advice-based selling. So I like that. That's a good premise. If you have more questions around, being a loan officer coach, put them down below. This is the time. We've got Mr. Greg Harkavy for another 15 minutes. So Greg, I want to make sure we crush it with this diagnostic tool. Make sure people know what it is, because I do believe one of the best ways I can serve during this hour, I think we've had a great conversation, but I think one of the best ways I can serve is that people that are tuned in, that want to go to the next level, they go through your diagnostic process. How can they, we got the link down below, but just describe it a little bit more for everybody.
Yeah. So there are 5 main areas that this diagnostic takes into consideration. And first and foremost, it's about your team and culture. Depending on where you're at, you definitely have a culture, but you have to ask, how am I cultivating it? So even if you're an originator, you don't have a loan officer or assistant, you still create a culture, and that's with the people you work with, your borrowers, your partners. But evaluating that, if you do have a team, evaluating how is your team performing. The second area we look at is your role. And a lot of what Dave and I have been talking about today is really understanding your role. The third is evaluating your loan process. The fourth is lead generation. And then the fifth is mission and messaging. And mission and messaging, to me, is really the key. That the scripts that I kind of leaked out, it's about understanding that if your mission is basically, I'm here to get as many deals as I can, I don't know that many people are going to be very engaged in that. I don't know many successful originators that sustain and have long-term relationships have that. When you start to understand what your mission is and how you message it out to everybody, prospecting becomes natural. It becomes just a natural outcome of living out what you want to. So those 5 areas in the diagnostic take you through a deep dive of questions. We came up with those 5 areas because we felt like they were the most common threads of what somebody that wants to be really successful must do. And most people don't score the same in everywhere. So what we do is we hone in on the opportunities with that diagnostic. So if you're crushing mission and messaging, but your loan process isn't quite strong, we're gonna say, let's dive in there. Let's really learn about what your loan process looks like. So we'll get into, that's where you get really tactical in the nuts and bolts and say, okay, what's your pre-qual like? How are you actually qualifying people? What's your team do? How do you communicate with your borrowers? Do they understand the loan process really well? Are you closing on time? If not, what are the inefficiencies? How well do you take a loan app? I mean, it can get that granular, but when we understand where you see yourself in the story, because it's a self-diagnostic, we can hone in on the opportunities rather than saying, we're going to tackle everything at once.
Love this. So guys, I'm going to share a few slides. I'm going to riff for a minute, and then we're going to close it up around tactics required to the future. So guys, what you're looking at right here is over here. This is what the competitive landscape looked like last year. If you're a referral-based local mortgage professional, you're competing against brokers, credit unions, online lenders, big banks. This is what it looks like this year. Like all in a single year, Zillow got in the mortgage space. So league aggregators are in mortgage. Redfin and Keller got in the mortgage space, new category. The big talk at all the big events is Amazon's going to get in the mortgage space. So here's the deal, guys. The world's changing. Competition is more intense. And so, couple things. One, rate shopping is going to continue to be intense. Like it's not like our people rate shopping you. Everybody's rate shopping you. The question is, do they grind you? And do you have a model that's sustainable? And so to me, this is the model of most mortgage professionals. Everything in red here is transaction. That's where you're spending all your time. And advice. This is, we could call this coaching, advice, clients for life. But guys, this is the model you need to get in. You need to get into a model because, transactions getting faster, it's getting shorter, it's getting more commoditized, and that's only going to accelerate. And so you really need to deliver this advice experience and this client for life experience. And Greg, I'm going to, one more minute, and then I'm going to open it up for you to kind of not pick this apart, but add your color to it. I think this is the value prop that most loan officers have lived in. And you can still live in this model where I close loans fast, 20 days, 10 days, 7 days. You can play the speed game. You can play the I have the lowest rate game and I keep my promises game, and deliver this transactional experience. Hey, here's your cost. Here's your monthly payment. The model that we teach is that you need to have really a disruptive value proposition. You need to have a client for life value prop where it's more than closing loans on time. It's about creating wealth with real estate by making smarter mortgage decisions. It's about, I'm going to manage that decision over time. And then of course it's mortgage coach, deliver graphs and charts, deliver this modern experience. So I want to just have you speak to that, and really, maybe we get to a few more questions in these last 10 minutes, but what are some of the skills and things that a loan officer needs to have a sustainable career and not get crushed by the tech companies, the disruptors that are coming into the space? What are those imperatives in your opinion?
Yeah, funny little story. So my wife and I hold on to one thing, and it's a date night every week. Well, we've been kind of busy, and she said, "Hey, Greg, the only way we're going to have a date night this week is if you actually come to my hairstylist, because I got to get my hair done." So I put a picnic basket together, have a bottle of wine, and her hairstylist starts telling me about the nightmare transaction she just had and how horrific this lender was. And as she started to unpack everything that was going on, what I knew is what always was, always will be, even with all the technology. Number one, I think you have to be a really good communicator. You have to explain to the borrower the entire process really well and keep them understanding what that process looks like. There was no trust that was built between this person, and their borrowing profile might have been more complex, 1099, they had rental properties. This person needed somebody that was going to be that advisor to guide them along the way. They were qualified, but the communication and the trust was horrible. So I think if you're going to separate and compete against the tech companies, people need to be able to ask questions, and they need to be able to get their answers. And I would encourage that you make available the space for every borrower you have to answer the questions they need. Know what you need to do. I love Mortgage Coach because it really helps educate on what wealth building looks like and making good decisions. But I still think the loan process can be mysterious for a lot of borrowers. So I'd couple the fact that not only inform them on wealth building, but the transactional side of the business is still hit and miss. Be excellent at it. Communicate it in a way that people can see it and they understand it. They need to know simple things. Why are you asking for another pay stub? That stuff still bugs people, and the requirements of doing business.
I want to insert one thing there, because that reminds me, it was a couple of years ago I interviewed Garth Graham from Strathmore, and I know that you guys have a great relationship with them, and they come to a lot of your CEO roundtables and the leadership you guys provide at the C-suite. But one of the things, I'll never forget it, because they're pretty obsessive about managing customer satisfaction, and that one of the biggest thing that most people get wrong is the checklist. How important getting that, hey, I'm taking your loan, here's your checklist, what we need. The fact that it was, well documented, accessible in multi-channels, mobile, desktop, in writing. That's just such a huge deal. So good point. How you communicate during the transaction and how you communicate the checklist of what's needed to close your loan, it matters. And I think most people just they do it, they check it off the list, but they don't do it at a level of excellence.
And I think we sometimes operate that we assume everybody does it with excellence. I'm telling you, your competition doesn't. So
good point, man. Good point.
Yeah.
What are some other skills? I advocate that, video is a skill that the modern referral-based loan officer needs to become a master at, and needs to use it in a lot of different ways. Well, I guess first, do you align on video, and how do you push and advocate video skill building to your clients? And then what are some other skills like that they might be modern, they might be different than the way people are used to doing things?
Yeah, and I think everybody thinks of video as a push, right? It's push video, and it's how I get out in social media, and I think all of that's great, but I have been doing a little more research even on LinkedIn. When you post versus direct message a video, like how you actually utilize it and personalize it to the individuals you want to hear your messages on. I think that's still critically important. We just put something out and post it, that's good, but personally reaching out to people with customized messages and videos better. I think we can use video more just in our day-to-day interaction instead of picking up the phone. If your client has the ability to go on video, have some of your meetings live, like even the exchange that you and I are having right now, Dave. If we were on the phone, it would be good, but it's not the same as being able to read body language. So if you're running a pretty high volume business, you can't meet face-to-face for every conversation. But I think you could use video even in that. Just how does it deepen the relationship, deepen trust, not just being a subject expert.
So guys, the two skills we're going to push right now is just a reminder to create videos, even text videos. We've been talking a lot about that. I'm going to put a link down below to my interview with Brian Manning, top producer with Guild, coaching client with you guys. Link down below. Check it out. This guy's doing 20 loans a month in Boulder. How he's using video is smart. Greg just proposed that using Zoom or a platform like Zoom is a good idea. I love that. So let's close out with just making sure people connect with Building Champions, because I know you guys started a new podcast. Daniel, by the way, if Daniel, you're watching this, I know I owe you a response to an email. But tell us about the podcast and anything else we need to know to connect with Building Champions.
Yeah, and if you were to go to our website, you can hop on the podcast there, so www.buildingchampions.com. We're really excited about this, seeing some of the positive commentaries. One of them that really made me happy was, "It's about time. I can't wait. Building Champions is finally doing a podcast." I would just say take the time and listen. I know podcasts are scratching a bunch of different itches, but this has been a lot of effort and thoughtfulness into the quality of these podcasts. So
I'm on the webpage, by the way. Where do I go to get the podcast? Just make sure people see it here.
Yeah. It's weird without having the control on that. We'll make sure we get the link that might be a little bit easier than maybe the minute we have left to direct everybody.
All right. I'll keep looking for it. But buildingchampions.com, there'll be a link down below to the actual podcast. We got a link to the diagnostic tool that, like I said, I've seen it. I interviewed Bill Hart recently on it. I mean, guys, it's awesome. If you are looking to upgrade your business, if you're looking to just be more intentional about how you create success in the mortgage business, not just production, but sustainable success over time, check it out. Link down below. So, Greg, this is the first time I've interviewed you, man. I am super pumped. Can't wait for the next one. If anybody has questions you'd like to have me ask Greg next time I interview him, put them down below. I know this will not be the last time we interview. Last question. I like to close on this. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self getting into the mortgage business? Or if you had a kid getting in the mortgage business, give us a minute of wisdom.
Oh, that's great. I think advice would be, make sure you're having fun. Don't do this business because it's a job. Do it because it's a passion. Because what the world needs are more people that are fired up about what we do. We don't need more people with jobs in this industry. So if you're going to do it all out and love what you do. Make sure you know why you love what you do and play in that space. That would be it. So
So guys, that was awesome. If you don't follow Greg on LinkedIn and Facebook, you should. When I was looking up pictures to use in the promotion of this, every picture was Greg doing life. It was him having fun with friends. It was having him do activities. And anybody who knows Greg knows that that's not marketing. Yes, he's got a personal brand, but that's just who he is. So I love that. That was a great answer to close this out. Guys, rock it out. Greg Harkavy, thank you for the first interview in Mortgage Coach Land, buddy.
Thank you very much.
Everybody, if you got value, give us a like, share this with your mortgage friends, and thanks for spending an hour with us. And if you do post questions over the next 24 hours, Greg and I will make sure that I'll get answered.
Awesome.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.